Hello, everyone. This is Danielle Gardner, and I am here with one of my favorite people, Brianne Grebil. Let me tell you a bit about Brianne. She has been in small business accounting and finance for over 2 decades. And one of the things that she really loves is bringing the depth of her experience to small business owners, especially creative types, and really guiding them in creating a new loving relationship with their finances, which that does sound really beautiful. So welcome, Brianne. Thank you for
Hi,
being here.
Danny. Thank you.
Today, we're talking about this idea of having a simple, practical path to financial confidence and, with these small business owners in mind, of course. So I want to start by asking you, what are you seeing out there? Why are you feeling on your heart at the moment to really speak about this, like having something simple and practical? Like, what are you seeing small business owners out there doing, thinking, whatever?
Yeah, the really funny thing is when I was in your tea room last season, and our group was having a conversation about finances and stuff, and you said something actually that I was like, well, that just nails it. Like I literally had to go write it down. It was so succinct. You said to have a good income, you have to have a good financial foundation. And that just struck me as obviously true because what I do see a lot is when people start a business for themselves, they decide to take on solopreneurship. They're super passionate about what they're doing. They're really creative, and of course, you want a good income. That's kind of why you're doing it. Uh, but without a foundation of really practical skills, tools, abilities in place, it doesn't really matter how much you focus on your marketing. It doesn't really you might want to focus on different revenue streams. You might have money mantras, and all of that is great. But I find it's like catching water with your hands. If you don't
Yeah,
have something in place to have a solid foundation, I just see so many people spinning their wheels, not really understanding their finances, not having that healthy relationship that I think is so important. So that's kind of, in my world, that's kind of that's what I do, is focus on those
mm,
kind of foundations. And I found that there's not nothing out there, but there's a lack of really good support to help people with those foundations.
yeah. I feel really passionate about that as well because I see women out there having these what I call CEO level goals,
Hmm.
to retire their husband and to have six figures or multiple six figures or seven figures, all of that. And it's yet like they don't have these basics in place for their like a financial system.
Hmm.
And like even, where I'm at right now, like I've had a really lovely system in place for a number of years now. But as I can think about, sort of reaching more, having a bigger impact and looking at bigger, higher levels of income. I even looked at my setup that is very nice and gone, this ain't going to cut it, you know. And so before I even, I've spent the last 6 months, the first half of this year, focusing on that, like just getting these little bits and pieces in
Hmm.
place. And some of that takes a long time,
Yeah, and it can evolve too. Like it absolutely can evolve. Like the system and the things you're using when you're very first starting out are not probably going to be the same things that you're
yeah,
using. But to not focus on that at all is really a detriment. You talk
yeah.
about like people wanting to be their own CEO, and I'm like, if it's just you, you also kind of have to be your own CFO.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, yeah,
um, until you're at the level where you can hire somebody who has more of that, financial education and background to focus on that. It does have to be all you, and that's okay.
yeah,
Like it's completely
yeah,
doable. I think
yeah,
a lot of people just get intimidated by the idea and just stop. They just don't focus
yeah,
on it.
yeah. And this is the thing, I think if it's not focused on, then these higher levels of income and clients or whatever when it does happen, it's a freaking nightmare, or can be if it's not set up. So there's a
Yeah,
lot of
and I can't tell you the
emphasis.
number of people that I see, their income increases, but so do their expenses, because they're not paying attention,
Yeah.
and so they don't really have any extra money.
Yeah. So there's like a lot of emphasis on mindset
Hmm.
and marketing or whatever. And yeah, not enough on this sort of stuff. So it's
Hmm.
great that we're talking about this.
Yeah.
So we're talking about this idea of having a practical path to financial confidence. And so what do
Hmm.
you mean by that, by practical?
Yeah, so I do feel like a lot of people, kind of like we were saying, when they want to, like, well, I want a good income, I want more income, they tend to focus on stuff that um, sometimes can be a little more ambiguous, like kind of like I'm all for adjusting your money mindset, and that's actually part of what I help people with. But you can have all the money mantras in the world and all the affirmations in the world, but if you don't have like the practical, tangible things in place, um, it's not going to be as effective. And so what I mean by
Yeah.
practical is literally, how are you approaching your finances? What are your systems? What are the tools that you're using? Do you even know what tools you need to be using? Do you
Yeah.
know the basics of what you're supposed to be keeping track of? The very, very like
Yeah.
nuts and bolts stuff,
Yeah.
that I find a lot of people are maybe vaguely aware of. Especially, and again, like you kind of talked about when you're introducing me, people who consider themselves really passionate and creative, um, they tend to skip that part and really stumble through a whole lot harder than they have to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's that
So
practical, simple, the skills, the tools, the resources that you're using.
yeah. And so then what is the path as you see it to build this better relationship with your finances?
Yeah. So I'm going to steal a phrase, the world according to Brianne, in my world,
Yeah, love
according
it.
to how I see it. There are 4 areas that I tell people to focus on. And the first one is, it's the simplest, it's the easiest, it actually is the most leveraged thing you can do. And it's just opening up a separate bank account. I
Yeah.
find some people do that naturally and instinctively. A lot of
Yeah.
people, they think, especially when they're first starting out, I don't have much income going on, there's not a lot happening, I'm just going to put it all in the personal account I already have. But that very practical thing of having a separate bank account is actually the easiest thing you can do to focus on finances of your business.
Yeah.
And I talked a little bit about that in our last interview.
Yeah.
Uh, and the second one we also talked about, which is having tools and systems that are in alignment with who you are.
Mm,
And we talked about how I don't recommend QuickBooks for a lot of people because it's not the right tool. It's a great tool, but it doesn't mean
yeah.
it's the right tool for you.
Yeah.
So that's just using, like, I don't feel like you should hate using your financial tools. There are
Yeah.
so many available out there now that I mean, you may not love it, but you should not hate it,
Yeah.
because I feel like that just causes so much tension on your nervous system and everything. And then now you have developed a relationship in which you hate engaging with your finances. And it's not your finances' fault. It's not your fault. Is you don't have the right tool for you.
Yeah.
So it's really finding something that works with how you work. And
Mm,
your systems also fall into that. So your own financial habits, so even if you have the right tool, how are you engaging with that tool? What are your
mm,
financial habits? Do you have some
mm,
sort of relationship with engaging with your finances?
mm,
Um, that I find a lot of people struggle with. They kind of get to it when they get to it. Whereas if they had some
mm.
sort of habit in place, that is, again, there's no wrong habit, there's no right habit.
Yeah.
You don't have to follow like the latest productivity guru's idea of when you should do any of this stuff, unless
Yeah.
you like it, unless it works for you.
Yeah.
Um,
I think I just
so
want to say
yeah.
that habit point is like that's just been highlighted so much for me in these last few weeks about in so many different areas of business. It's like
Mm-hmm.
everyone knows what they're meant to be doing in so many ways.
Mm-hmm.
It's that they lack the habits. And um, this even that simple act of habit tracking or tracking publicly with a group of
Mm-hmm.
people, it can be really helpful. It's like that's the thing that really works quite well. And yeah, with my own, like I was sort of one of these people who I got to my finances sort of, when I got to them, like it was
Yeah.
more or less every week or two. But then when I created this habit of this like CEO day, it was like, oh, well, slash CFO day. It's like, well, what would a CEO be doing? CFO, well, like, and all of a sudden, like doing my finances
Hmm.
on a Monday, or overseeing the person who's now doing them, making space for that. It feels good. It feels like, well, this is
Yeah.
what a,
Yeah, it
you know,
just builds a rhythm, and
yeah,
I find
yeah,
we naturally like rhythms. Like
yeah,
the funny thing is I was just listening to a podcast this morning, and I was like, I need to write that down because I feel like this will resonate with you as well. They were talking about James Clear, who wrote the book Atomic Habits, which is kind of like a
yeah,
pretty popular
yeah,
book. I have it. I haven't read it
yeah,
yet, but they quoted him from the book. If you want better results, then forget about setting goals. Focus on your system instead.
yeah,
And I have, especially in working with you, I feel like, Danny, you've really nailed, I mean, it's two things, the system, but also like the focus of your system. It's not the more aggressive, I guess, for lack of a better word, masculine, like forward momentum. There's still systems. So there's guidance there, but
yeah,
it's a more flowed thing. And I feel I've been so productive in the last year since following your systems and doing the things that I wanted to get done. I wasn't focusing necessarily on the actual end result. I was
yeah,
following the system.
yeah,
And I feel like the same can absolutely be true for your finances. If you have some sort of system, and
yeah.
again, it doesn't necessarily matter what the system is. Like mine, I check out, like I check out on my finances. I do all my financial work on the 10th, 20th, and 30th. I don't know
Mm.
why, but I just like that, or the 20th in
Yeah, right.
February.
Yeah,
Um,
okay.
that's my system, and it works great. It's in my calendar, like it's on my phone. Like I know when the 10th, 20th, or 30th comes up, I've got like an hour chunked out in my schedule. Nothing gets scheduled then. That's my
Yeah,
system. That
yeah,
works for me. But that means like 3 times a month I am dedicated to my finances. And so it's like,
yeah.
you're in a relationship with your money. You might as well like not let it be a neglectful one.
Yeah, yeah. And that you sharing that story, it reminds me of something that I've been experiencing this past year as I'm trying to transfer my whole business over to the Spanish system.
Mm,
And I kept sort of felt like I kept getting like hitting brick walls because I knew I wanted to do things in a certain way that were very me, that were very
mhm.
Danny. And everyone was saying, oh no, we do it like this manually. Or I was just hearing all these things. I'm like, no, no. And it's like, but everyone was saying the same thing. But I was like a dog with a bone. I'm like, no. I don't care if the whole of Spain is doing it this way. I know that somehow there's going to be a different way. And I ended up finding it, and
Mm,
it's made it joyful for me. I didn't just sort of give up. And I think, yeah, just going back to like making it really fit us.
mhm,
And if we have a vision for how it could work, then just keep following that, like keep trying stuff, keep
mhm.
investigating. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that actually kind of leads into the other, I think, foundational pillar is filling in gaps in your knowledge. Um,
Mm,
like you had to fill in gaps of your knowledge of like learning the Spanish system so that
mm,
maybe you could work around it. but
mm,
I find it's really interesting a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times there are things that people know that they don't know, and
mm.
then they just continue to ignore those things.
Yeah,
There's plenty of things that you don't know in any field of business.
yeah,
And you'll figure those out as life brings them up for you. But if you know that there's something you don't know and you're not addressing it, I do find that just it causes a distance within us.
yeah,
So, that may be like you need to learn a bit about self-employment taxes, or you need to research financial tools. Like,
yeah,
that you don't know what to use. So the research
yeah,
is, what are the options? you know,
yeah,
um, that I think is a big, when you have those gaps between like knowing you don't know something and you need to know it, but you're not doing anything about it. I think a lot of financial confidence like slips through that gap, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because again, you're not really in integrity with yourself. Like, you should,
Yeah.
but you're not.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
And
yeah.
it reminds me of how in the beginning, like my first sort of head in the sand thing was like just didn't sort of want to look at my bank accounts. Like I wanted to
Hmm.
know how much I was earning, but there was this sort of like almost a fear of like, oh, but what's really going on in there, you know?
Yeah.
And and over the time there had been, I felt resistance, and I guess what I want to say to anyone who feels that is it's normal. Like
Oh, absolutely.
a lot of
Absolutely.
people, like you're not alone in that. It's like, you don't have, there's nothing wrong with you. It's just like, it's that gap that you're talking
Yeah.
about. It's
There's
like,
a,
you know,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, well, really just echoing what you're saying. It's like there's a
Yeah.
gap that needs to be filled, and face it, it's going to be uncomfortable, but it's going to
Yeah.
be a short-term pain for long-term gain,
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is I have a friend who's a psychologist, and he was talking. There's a name. It's so common. They named it the ostrich effect. So, and you even said, right, you had your head in the sand. And he's like, what I find really interesting. So when you think of an ostrich, if you don't know, maybe you don't know anything about ostriches, but they stick their head in the sand a lot. And so in the psychology world, they started calling it the ostrich effect when you are avoiding something.
Mm,
And it is a very common thing. We will often avoid things that we perceive or imagine are going to be challenging or difficult or have a negative outcome. Like we don't even know that for
mm,
sure. We just think it might.
mm,
So we kind of ignore it. And they named it the ostrich effect. And he was like, it's really interesting. Do you know why ostriches stick their head in the sand? I was like, no, I've never seen an ostrich.
mm.
He's like, actually, they stick their head in the sand because that's where their eggs are. Their eggs are in the sand and they stick their head in to keep turning the eggs so that they're evenly heated. And he's like, so when an ostrich sticks its head in the sand, he's actually, or she's actually taking care of what needs to be taken care of. He's like, so it's
Yep.
almost the opposite thing. He's like, so go ahead and be an ostrich. Like, just do
Yeah.
whatever you got to do to get done what needs to get done. I always
Yeah.
remember
Yeah.
that little anecdote. I always thought that was really funny.
Yeah.
um, so we got three. So opening a bank account, simple one,
Yep.
focusing on tools and systems that work for you, filling in gaps in your knowledge. And then the last one is mindset. It is
Yeah.
you're possibly changing your perspective.
Yeah.
Because I come up against a lot of people, especially creatives, who have some version of I'm not a numbers person, and
Mm,
thus I'm not going to be good at the taking care of my money part, or I'm not a finance person, I'm not a money person, I don't like the money side, so thus I'm never going to be able to do that part well. And I
yeah.
find that when you really slow down and look at what that person means by I'm not a numbers person, it's just something came up in their past, or their idea of, they've got some sort of idea of what numbers are and what money is that
Yep.
isn't in alignment with what really needs to get done. I try to tell people, like, I promise you, whatever skills you are using to do the work you're doing, the exact same skills can be applied to managing your finances.
Mm,
It's not some foreign separate thing. Like, managing your finances, it's just a series of small tasks. Like, and honestly,
yeah.
numbers aren't even necessarily involved in a lot of it.
Yeah.
So even if you hate numbers, that's not a lot of what you need to do to just take care of what you need to take care of.
Yeah.
So those are kind of like, that's the path. Those are the four kind of pillars that I think really do make up a strong financial foundation. And when you have those kinds of things lined up, and again, they will evolve and change. And you may have great tools and systems now, but as your business changes, you may need to change those and come back to that foundation. But if that's in place, then you've really got a good solid ground to step off from when it comes
Yeah.
to growing your business, increasing your revenue.
Yeah. And the peace of mind that comes with that. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what I remember when I finally decided to just sort it out, and I actually got some help with it. And, I felt very supported, getting that help, educating myself as well. Like the energy that it's freed up is amazing.
Yeah.
So we've got a final question here. So how does someone know where to begin and move down this path?
Well, it's really about kind of just checking in with where you are, because the answer is different for each individual. You know, some
Mm.
people have already opened up, like step one, I always tell people, like, seriously, open a bank account. That's always step one for everybody. So if you have not done that, that's where you start.
Yeah.
If you already have, then it's just kind of checking in with yourself. It's kind of like, I know there's a lot of people who know that there's something that they don't know. People will kind of know like intuitively as they hear those things, like, do you have tools and systems in place? How are your habits? Do you need to research something? Do you need to fill an education? Do you have a mentally solid relationship with finances?
Mm.
If any of those ones go like, oh yeah, that's kind of where I need to that's where I need to focus. I find people instinctively kind of know that. So
Yeah.
you know, when I talk to people one-on-one, it becomes very obvious
Yeah.
where the most leverage is going to be in that place where it's like, yeah, you
Yeah.
kind of know.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So, um, something that you've created since we last spoke, had a conversation about finances, is you now have a tiny course called Simplify Your Finances.
Yes.
So, can you share a little bit about that? And I am assuming that that course is also there to help with what we've been talking about as well, to
Yeah.
take people along that path. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
As I was talking to people, engaging with people, and like seeing that there were kind of these four main areas where people were really struggling, I created a tiny course that focuses on each of those areas. So, and it walks you through, like, particularly like the tools and systems. Like, I walk you
Mm.
through, like, here's a bunch of options that I know are available, and here's how you decide possibly what might work for you. If you're this kind of person, you
Mm.
probably want to avoid this, but this might be good.
Mm.
I've got a great little a whole lesson on how to build those financial habits, and again, in a way
Yeah.
that works for you, with a bunch of suggestions on maybe try this, maybe try that. If you don't like these, don't do this. That
Yeah.
kind of a thing. And
Yeah.
it fills in some of the basic financial knowledge that some people, when they're first starting out especially, may not know. But even I find some people have been in business for a couple of years and they're still not quite sure of just like basic business finance. Like,
Yeah.
income, expenses, profit. So it focuses on each of those areas to really give somebody a really strong financial foundation.
Yeah. So one of the things that I know, well, I know people do this because I do it when I'm looking to decide whether or not I'm going to do this course that looks really great. One of the things I'm always wondering about is, but will I actually do it? Because I've signed up for so many things in the
Mm-hmm.
past. Will I actually do this one? And so this is why I think it's really helpful. I mean, we say tiny course, but if people haven't experienced, well, tiny courses according to Danny Gardner before, then they might not know what that means exactly. So with your course, um, how long would it take someone to sit down and actually watch the lessons
The
from
whole, like,
start to
watchable
finish?
time is it's less than 90 minutes. It's like
Yeah,
87 or something like that. So to
yeah.
watch each lesson is less than 90 minutes.
And
I
it's
think
broken up in, yeah, broken up into how many lessons?
there are 6 lessons. The longest one is like 20 minutes. And that's just because I'm going over a lot of, like, these are the tools that are available and why you
Yeah,
may or may not like them. I go really in depth in
yeah,
that one. So that one's the longest one at 20 minutes. Um,
yeah,
but and again, like, not every lesson will necessarily apply to every person. Like, if you've already got your bank account, like, but
yeah,
I walk through like what I suggest looking for in a bank account, how to use that bank account. But what I think is really valuable is at the end of each lesson, there's also okay, now here's what you do with what we just talked about. Here's the
yeah,
practical step. Like, we just talked about this. The thing to
yeah,
do with this lesson is, XYZ. Um,
yeah,
so that you just don't, I find a lot of times you get like a lot of information and you're like, all right, cool, I learned a lot. Now what?
yeah, yeah.
So it
Whereas
really does.
when it's broken up like that, it's like you can schedule,
Yeah.
half an hour, 45 minutes and go, all right, I'm going to watch that lesson and take some action. And
Yeah.
then, just chip away at it in these bite-sized chunks. And um, yeah, I think it's a lot more meaningful, isn't it, when we can actually, um, you know, take it in, implement, then take the next bit in, then implement. So yeah, I love that.
No, I did admittedly steal a lot of your format. I mean, you have a whole course teaching people to do a tiny course, so I don't feel bad about it.
You're meant to, yeah, you're meant to steal the format.
But it's a great, and I remember watching some of your tiny courses and going, it's refreshing. It's digestible. It's not overwhelming. Like, it's almost like slap you in the face, simple. And it just, the difference between, and I remember just recently I was looking at some sort of financial course that was really interesting, and I was really interested in this woman's perspective, and she had a course, and as a selling point, she was like, over 10 hours of like material. And I'm just like, I'm out.
Yeah, right. I can't even believe people are still doing this. I looked at something recently and it was 20 hours. And I'm like, really? I'm just not. I'm just not. And it was a shame because I really want to do this course, but I'm like, seeing the watch time, I'm like, it's a no.
I'm not going to do it. I'm just not going to do it. Even if I'm really interested, even if it's really fantastic. I know, at least for me, there are some people who probably do, I'm sure. But for me, I'm like, I ain't got time for that. I don't have the bandwidth for that. Short and sweet. So that's definitely why when I was forming this, like wanting to give people these tools and resources, I was like, tiny. The reason that I've been able to be this productive is because of following your system. And I can't tell you, like, the message organizer that that you have, organize your message. It took me a minute to really realize how valuable of a tool that is. Like, as I've been working on the message organizer for the tax course, it takes a minute to kind of get into the perspective and what you're aiming for. But once it clicks, it's just like, oh my God, this is the thing that makes it easier. Like, it creates the system, and then I just follow the system.
Oh, well done. All right. Well, below this video, I'm going to leave the link to the Simplify Your Finances, and we'll also put the link to the other one about the small business tax.
Okay, great. Demystify taxes.
Demystify taxes, yeah, because that sounds really great.
Yeah, and that is obviously US based.
Yes, yep. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for this conversation, Brianne. I know this is going to be really helpful to you know, both of our sort of audiences. So it's been a joy hanging out with you again. So thank you so much.
You as well.
And thank you. Thank you for those who are watching. If you have any questions, you can comment below, and Brianne or I will come and respond to you. All right. Thank you, and bye for now.
Bye.